Good afternoon, my viewing audience. I'm privileged to be Gene Rice, one of the original board members and one of the original civil rights members of Picture the Homeless.
Okay, Gene Rice, I'd like to thank you for participating. Okay, now I have some questions for you. And the first question is going to be, how can DHS and NYPD work together on police raids?
The first thing is that DHS and the police department need to do a joint training on the United States Constitution. Again, as Picture the Homeless has long maintained, you don't sacrifice the Constitution for safe streets. Same thing applies to DHS. You don't sacrifice the Constitution of the United States so that you can maintain safe space within the shelter system.
Okay, very good. Now, is NYPD targeting shelters for criminals?
No, because Picture the Homeless again has pointed out repeatedly that homelessness is not synonymous with criminalization. There are a lot of people within the shelter system that unfortunately fell through the cracks, have no safety net to sustain them, so it's a misnomer. It's ill-advised for the police or DHS to assume that whoever's inside of the shelter system is a criminal.
All right. Can you please tell my audience out there, right? And also I want you to explain it. Have you ever, first of all, have you ever heard of the Fourth Amendment? If you have, can you just let us know what that is?
The Fourth Amendment is one of the first amendments to our United States Constitution. It has a long and cherished history in our system of democracy. In colonial days, before the Revolutionary War, under something called writs of assistance, the king's soldiers could just go into a colonialist house without a warrant, without justification, with something called a writ of assistance, and they could just take over this person's house. And the person had no rights to their property. It was all your property rights was sovereign to the king. So when the colonialists made our nation, one of the first concerns they had was to make people's property free from government intrusion.
I see. Now my next question is to you is that, what is it like when NYPD raided your shelter for the first time?
Well, I never was in the shelter system to witness one of these raids. However, the founding members of Picture the Homeless, Louis Higgins, who's passed away, and Anthony Williams, who lives in Pennsylvania now happily married, gave me first-hand knowledge of what it was like because they was in Bellevue shelter when under Mayor Giuliani these draconian midnight raids first started. And they say that the warrant squad came into the shelter on a fishing expedition. Fishing meaning they didn't know who was upstairs or who wasn't upstairs. And what they did was come in with a list of people who had outstanding warrants, and they hoped that if they came upstairs in the shelter system, they would find some of the people that was in the shelter system who was also fugitives from a warrant. And sometimes after they accosted 40 people, they would get 2 people with warrants.
Now, I was doing some research, and help me to understand that it seems like here in New York, NYPD doing shelter raids is not new. They've been doing shelter raids for over 20 years. Why? And how did that get started?
As I just alluded to, Giuliani was the mayor. when these draconian shelter raids first started. And you're right, it was over 2 decades ago. And what happened was, under this broken windows police theory, the police department cast a wide net, like fishermen do. And the practice being, if you cast your net wide enough over enough area, you're gonna catch some fish. So then the NYPD never lets you know how many innocent people they intimidated, humiliated. They always focus on how many fish they caught. So maybe after you intimidate 100 people, you get 3 people that actually had warrants.
Wow, isn't that something? Now my next question I'm going to ask you, I want you to take your time and answer this one, because this is a big one. This is a big one, so you got to be ready for this one, okay? Now, is quota time a good time to raid the shelter?
Repeat the question.
Is quota time with the NYPD a good time to raid the shelter system in New York City?
The reason why I asked you to repeat the question, Brother Marcus, is because according to the NYPD, they don't use quotas. But we've had a lot of courageous cops that have went undercover and taped orientation from precinct commanders where they have said, you got to bring me so many collars. If you don't, you're going to be walking the beat in Staten Island. That's a quota system. Now, Kelly, who used to be the police commissioner, and Bratton, who's on his 2nd term as being a police commissioner, they say that it's necessary to maintain some kind of quota in order to measure police productivity. From a community policing standpoint, I think that method of measuring productivity is disingenuous. For instance, we got some good cops that cross kids across the street every day.
Right.
We got some good cops that stop traffic to let old ladies cross the street when the light changes while they're in the middle of the street. To me, that's productivity, but those kind of activities are never measured. So the measure of productivity is only when you detain somebody or arrest somebody, and to me, that doesn't take in the whole thing, the whole mission of what police officers are supposed to do within our city.
Well, on that note, I'd like to thank you for participating. This has been another classic one, and for those that's listening and watching, I hope they have a little bit more idea on police raids and what goes on in the world of shelter life, you know, for a lot of our New Yorkers who had never ever been in a shelter. But that's it. Thank you a lot, everybody.
Hold up. In closing, I'd like to say, I hope that this interview encourages my fellow citizens to do research on the history of the 4th Amendment of the United States Constitution so they will understand how vital this amendment is to our American democracy. Thank you.
Yes.